Okay, so you want to buy a country, draw your own borders, write your own laws, print your own passport, collect taxes from your own citizens. Answer to absolutely no one. Here's the part nobody ever explains. Buying a country is actually possible. People have done it. Some of them are still doing it right now. And the ones who figured out how to make it work turned their little patch of land into a money machine that most legitimate businesses would be jealous of. But the ones who got it wrong, they lost everything. Some of them to bad weather condition, some to lawyers, and at least one of them to mercenaries. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what it costs to buy a country. Not a metaphor, actual numbers. And you will understand why the smallest nations on the planet have quietly built one of the most profitable business models in the history of human civilization. We'll get to the money in a few minutes. But first, you need to understand why buying a country and owning a country are two completely different problems, and why the second one is the one that kills people. Let's start with what you're actually buying. Here is the thing nobody tells you. There is not a single country on Earth with a for sale sign on it. Every piece of land on the planet, every mountain, every island, every reef, every sandbar is legally claimed by some government that has no interest in selling it to you. The international system of sovereign states has been locked since 1945. Countries don't go on the market, they go to war. So when people say buy a country, what they actually mean is one of three things. Option 1, buy an island and try to declare it independent. Possible, almost never works. We'll explain why in a moment. Option 2, buy a country that already exists. Technically impossible, but there are creative workarounds that have actually happened, and the numbers behind them will surprise you. Option 3, build something that functions like a country from scratch. The most ambitious path, the most expensive, and the one with the most spectacular failures. Let's go through each one, but stay with me, because the real business model, the part that explains how tiny nations are minting money right now, that comes in about 5 minutes, and it will change how you see every passport you've ever held. The most obvious way to buy a country is to buy land. An island. Private islands start at around $500,000 for a small, undeveloped rock somewhere remote. Mid-range islands, a few acres, some beach, maybe a structure or two, run $1 million to $10 million. Large, developed islands in desirable locations cross $50 million and keep going from there. In 2022, a group of 80 investors crowdfunded the purchase of Coffee Cay, a 1.2-acre island off the coast of Belize, $180,000. They named it the Principality of Islandia. They designed a flag, they wrote a constitution, they declared themselves a nation, and then they found out the hard part. Belize didn't care. The island was inside Belize's territorial waters. Belize's laws still applied. Their customs officials still had jurisdiction. The Principality of Islandia was, from a legal standpoint, a piece of Belizean property with a very enthusiastic homeowners association. This is the wall every island buyer hits. Under international law, specifically the 1933 Montevideo Convention, a country must have 4 things to be recognized as a state: a permanent population, a defined territory, a functioning government, and the ability to enter into relations with other states. You can buy the land, you can move people onto it, you can write the government, but that 4th one, relations with other states, requires other countries to agree that you exist, and other countries never agree, because agreeing would set a precedent. If a billionaire can buy an island and declare independence, every disgruntled province on Earth has a roadmap. No existing government on Earth wants that roadmap to exist, so they simply don't recognize you. And without recognition, you have no currency anyone accepts, no banking system anyone connects to, no treaties, no entry into any international organization, no seat at the UN. You're not a country. You're a very expensive piece of real estate with its own flag. But here's what's interesting. One man actually made it work. His name was Roy Bates. He wasn't a billionaire. He wasn't a lawyer. He was a British Army major who ran a pirate radio station from a decommissioned World War II sea fort sitting 7 miles off the English coast. On September 2nd, 1967, he declared it an independent country. He called it the Principality of Sealand. Sealand. He named himself Prince Roy. His wife became Princess Joan. On her birthday, he didn't buy the platform. He just occupied it because it sat in international waters outside British jurisdiction. And when British workers came to service a nearby buoy, his son fired warning shots to drive them off. They took the Bates family to court. The judge threw the case out. The platform, he ruled, was outside British territory. English courts had no authority there. Roy Bates framed that ruling and called it national independence. The British government, embarrassed and uncertain how to respond, decided not to storm a family on a sea fort. Britain, a nuclear power, flinched, and Sealand has been there ever since. Today, Sealand sells noble titles, Baron, Count, Duke, Lord, for anywhere from £29 to £499 online. It sells merchandise. It has 1.5 million followers across social media, e-citizens in 137 countries. Someone once tried to buy it for $906 million. Roy Bates said no. He died at 91 as a prince. That's not even the craziest part. Keep watching, because what Sealand proves is a principle that tiny island nations figured out decades later and turned into a billion-dollar industry. You don't need to be big to be powerful. You just need to be useful to the right people. Let's talk about what it actually costs to run this thing, because this is the part everyone skips. They get obsessed with the idea of buying a country. They never think about the operating costs of keeping one alive. A country has bills every month, whether anyone is paying attention or not. The smallest recognized nation on Earth is Vatican City, 44 hectares, about 800 people. It has a budget of roughly $300 million a year. Museums, guards, radio stations, diplomatic missions, infrastructure. That's $300 million to run 44 hectares. Nauru, a tiny island nation in the Pacific, population 10,000, runs an annual government budget of roughly $160 million. Roads, schools, a hospital, a police force, power generation, water, salaries for every government worker. Tuvalu, another Pacific island nation, population 11,000, spends around $68 million a year running its government. And here's where the numbers get wild. Tuvalu doesn't have oil. It doesn't have tourism. It barely has land. Most of it sits less than 2 meters above sea level. What it does have is something almost nobody on Earth thought about until someone accidentally realized it was worth a fortune. Its internet domain. In 1999, the world was still building the internet. Every country on Earth was assigned a 2-letter internet domain. The United States got .us, Germany got .da, and the tiny Pacific island nation of Tuvalu, through pure geographic luck, got .tv. Every television network, every streaming service, every broadcast company on Earth wanted that domain. Tuvalu leased the .tv domain to a California company called VeriSign. The deal eventually paid Tuvalu around $5 million a year, equivalent at 1% to 10% of its entire government budget, from a typo in the geographic alphabet. But even $5 million a year doesn't cover a $68 million budget. So how does Tuvalu fill the gap? That answer brings us to the part one promised you at the start, the business model that tiny nations figured out. And it is one of the most counterintuitive, most quietly profitable things any government anywhere has ever done. They started selling citizenship. Here is what nobody outside the financial planning world understands. A passport is a product, and certain countries, very small, very strategic, very clever countries, have turned their passports into one of the most valuable things they sell to the outside world. The industry is called citizenship by investment, and in 2024, it was valued at $5.2 billion globally. This is how it works. A small nation passes a law that says, if you invest a significant amount of money in our country, we will make you a citizen. Full citizen, passport and all. Not a visa, not a residency card. A passport, and not just any passport. A passport that lets you travel to 140 or more countries without applying for a visa in advance. A Schengen area passport, access to the UK, to Singapore, to Hong Kong. The buyers aren't tourists. They're wealthy individuals from Russia, China, the Middle East, Nigeria, places where a local passport is a liability, not an asset, where travel is restricted, where your assets can be frozen at a government's discretion, where having a second passport from a stable, internationally recognized nation is worth more than almost any other financial asset you could buy. So they pay. Dominica, a small Caribbean island, Population 75,000. Charges a minimum of $200,000 for citizenship through its investment program. In 2023, Dominica collected $230 million from that program. That is 37% of its entire GDP from selling passports. Grenada, another small Caribbean island, brought in $412 million in a single year from its citizenship program, more than any previous year in the program's history. St. Kitts and Nevis, where the program has run since 1984, once generated 60 to 70% of its entire government revenue from passport sales. In 1 year, the IMF credited the country's citizenship savings with reducing its national debt below 60% of GDP. This is the business model. You don't need oil. You don't need a port. You don't need a stock exchange. You need a recognized passport, and the political will to sell it, and it gets better or worse, depending on how you look at it. The global market for this product is getting more competitive. Countries are undercutting each other. Vanuatu will give you a passport in 2 months for $130,000. That's less than a luxury car. Nauru just launched a program in 2024 starting at $90,000, and the buyers keep coming. In the first quarter of 2025, UK nationals applying for citizenship by investment programs increased by 183% compared to the same period a year earlier. 183%. Britain's own citizens are buying their way out. But here is the part that explains everything, and the reason this business model is now under serious pressure. When you sell enough passports, the passport loses value. If 50,000 people from Russia hold Dominica passports, and they do, then a Dominica passport becomes associated with Russian money. And the US starts asking questions. The EU starts scrutinizing. Britain starts restricting access. In 2025, the US flagged 36 countries, including 5 Caribbean citizenship jurisdictions, for potential travel restrictions. Visa-free access started being revoked. The product began losing the exact feature that made it valuable. In 2025, the European Court ruled that EU citizenship cannot be sold for money. Malta, the last EU country still offering the program, was forced to shut it down. The market is tightening. The buyers are still there, but the product is getting harder to guarantee. Let's go back to the operating reality, because here's what happens to almost everyone who tries to build a country from scratch. They budget for the purchase. They don't budget for the maintenance. Water. A small country cannot assume there's fresh water in the ground. Desalination plants cost $2 million to $5 million to build. They run on electricity you have to generate, and the electricity requires fuel you have to import. On a ship, that charges you premium freight rates, because your volume is too small to negotiate a decent contract. Power. A diesel generator system for a small island community of 1,000 people cost $3 million to $5 million installed. Fuel to run it, imported, runs $2 to $4 million a year. Infrastructure. Roads don't build themselves. Neither do port. The port you need to receive those fuel shipments might cost $10 million to $30 million to construct. Healthcare. A functioning medical clinic requires doctors. Doctors require salaries competitive enough to make them choose your island over an established hospital in a developed country. A basic island hospital runs $3 million to $8 million a year just in staffing and supplies. Then there are the costs nobody talks about at all. Defense. You need someone to protect your borders. Most micronations can't afford a military. Sealand's defense budget is one caretaker and whatever weapons the Bates family has on hand. In 1978, this was nearly catastrophic. While Roy Bates and his wife were in Austria meeting with potential investors, a group of German and Dutch mercenaries flew a helicopter to Sealand, took the platform by force, and held his son Michael hostage. Roy Bates hired his own helicopter, flew back to Sealand, came down, took his country. The mercenary leader was tried in a Sealand court for treason. Germany sent a diplomat from its London embassy to negotiate his release. Roy Bates held a foreign national hostage until Germany blinked. And Germany blinked because the alternative was admitting that Sealand was a country, which meant recognizing it. And that was a worse problem than just paying to get their citizen back. Bates released him after many weeks, after extracting whatever terms he wanted That is what the defense budget of a micronation looks like in practice. Everything. After the islands that got annexed, the platforms that got invaded, the passports that got devalued. Two things: a small nation stops being useful and starts being a problem. The larger nations around it close the doors. The programs get shut down. The visa access gets revoked. This is the existential risk every micronation lives with every single day. You don't just need to run the country. You need to stay useful, because the day you become inconvenient, the day your product creates more problems than it solves for the powers around you, that is the day your country stops existing, whether you have a flag or not. In 1967, a pirate radio broadcaster climbed onto a rusting sea fort with his wife and 2 children and told the world he was starting a country. No one believed him. The British government drew up plans to remove him by force, then decided it wasn't worth the embarrassment. The UN never recognized him. No country ever formally acknowledged his sovereignty, and yet Roy Bates died as a prince. His son is still there. 1.5 million people follow Sealand. You can buy a Sealand title right now for the price of a dinner out. The whole idea is that ownership of a country isn't about the land. It's not about the flag. It's not about being recognized by anyone who matters in Geneva or New York or Brussels. It's about having something people want and no one else is selling. Dominica figured that out. So did Tuvalu. So did Roy Bates on his birthday present platform in the North Sea. The countries that work aren't the ones with the most land. They're the ones with the most useful product. And the ones that fail, they're the ones who bought the land and forgot to ask, what is the one thing this country sells that nobody else can? Get that answer right, and you're building a nation. Get it wrong, and you're just paying property tax on the most expensive mistake you've ever made in a country no one agrees exists. Next up, if you want to see what the economics look like owning a trucking company or an airline, businesses everyone assumes always wins, that video is right here.